They thought they were picking on an easy target, a quiet old man on a bus. What they didn't know was that he was a battle-hardened Vietnam veteran with lessons they would never forget. It was a typical day on the bus heading downtown in Baltimore. The air was thick and heavy, filled with commuters eager to get home. The soft murmur of conversations mixed with the occasional screech of brakes. Near the front, an elderly black man eased into his seat, his hands rough and weathered, resting on a cane that looked just as old as him. His clothes were simple, a worn jacket and neatly pressed slacks, reflecting someone who valued dignity over flash. At first, no one paid much attention to him. He was the type of person you glance at and forget, blending into the everyday hustle. But his posture was different. Upright, his gaze steady, as if no weight of the world could bend him. Yet, a faint crease in his brow hinted at a life that had seen more than its share of challenges. 3 seats back, a group of teenagers hopped on. Their laughter was loud and carefree as they scanned the bus for amusement. One of them, a lanky kid in a bright red hoodie, spotted the old man. His eyes lit up with mischief, not respect. He nudged his friends, muttering something that triggered a chorus of snickers. The man remained still, staring out the window as the streets passed by. Whether he heard the whispers or not, he gave no sign. But the boys weren't content with just whispers. They wanted a reaction. "Hey, old man," the boy in red called out, his voice breaking through the bus's dull hum. "Lose your walker or something. Waiting for someone to carry you home." A ripple of tension spread through the bus. Some passengers glanced at the boys, others at the man, but most kept their heads down, pretending not to hear. The old man shifted slightly, but still said nothing, his eyes fixed outside. Emboldened by the man's silence, the boy in the hoodie stood up, swaying slightly as the bus hit a bump. "What's wrong, Grandpa? Cat got your tongue?" The man's fingers tightened around his cane, but his face remained calm, a flicker of patience in his eyes. He turned his head just enough to meet the boy's gaze, and in that brief moment, something changed. There was no anger, no fear, just a quiet strength that seemed to settle the air around him. The boy hesitated for a moment, but quickly shook it off, too proud to stop now. The bus rattled on, the passengers tense, as though waiting for something to happen. Little did they know, the old man's silence wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a choice, and it was about to change everything. The teenagers' laughter grew louder, echoing through the bus, demanding attention. The boy in the red hoodie leaned closer, his voice dripping with mockery. "What's wrong, old man? Too good to talk to us," he sneered, drawing chuckles from his friends. The old man stayed seated, his cane firm between his knees. His face gave nothing away, but his hands gripped the cane a little tighter. Across the aisle, a young woman shifted in her seat, casting a nervous glance at the boys, before returning to her phone. A man in a gray suit adjusted his tie and buried his face deeper into a newspaper, clearly uncomfortable. No one wanted to get involved. Red Hoodie smirked at the silence. "Look at him," he said to his friends. "He probably thinks he's too good for us." "What? Are you some kind of king or something?" "Yeah," another boy chimed in. "You gonna knight us with that cane, Grandpa?" The old man tilted his head slightly, as if recalling a distant memory. The bus hit a red light, jerking to a stop. Finally, the man spoke, his voice low but firm. "Respect is a lesson some people only learn the hard way." The words were simple, but they carried weight, settling heavily in the air. For a moment, the boys exchanged uncertain glances, but Red Hoodie recovered quickly, masking his unease with bravado. "Oh, so now you talk," he said, dripping with sarcasm. "Respect, huh? That's rich, coming from someone too scared to stand up for himself." The man turned his head slightly, locking eyes with the boy. "You think strength is loud, don't you?" His voice was calm, but it carried an unshakable truth. "You have no idea what real strength looks like." The bus fell silent. Every passenger was now fully tuned in. Even the boys' friends had stopped laughing, their grins now uneasy. The light turned green and the bus jolted forward, its passengers swaying. Red Hoodie stepped closer, leaning over the old man in a weak attempt at intimidation. "Why don't you show us then? Let's see how strong you are." The old man sighed, a long, measured exhale, his eyes calm and unreadable. It wasn't just the boy who was about to learn something. Everyone on that bus was about to witness a lesson they'd never forget. For a moment, time seemed to slow, tension thick in the air. The old man's grip on his cane tightened, but his gaze remained steady. His mind, however, drifted back, 40 years, to a time far from this bus, back to the swamps of Vietnam, where the air was filled with the roar of helicopters and the crack of gunfire. He had been just a boy then, younger than the kids taunting him now, but war had aged him quickly. Survival wasn't a choice. It was an instinct. The bus hit a pothole, jolting him back to the present. Straightening, his grip on the cane firmed. He wasn't angry. Anger didn't come easily anymore. What he felt was deeper, a responsibility to teach these boys a lesson they had clearly never learned. Red Hoodie interrupted his thoughts with another sharp laugh. "What's the matter, Grandpa? Cat got your tongue again?" The man didn't respond. Instead, his eyes studied the boy, reading the bravado, the false confidence that comes with youth. He'd seen it before in soldiers, thinking they were invincible until the battlefield taught them otherwise. Across the aisle, an older woman whispered nervously to her companion, but no one intervened. The silence wasn't fear, it was indifference. Finally, the old man spoke, his voice steady. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he said, his tone stopping the boy mid-laugh. "Oh yeah? Who's that?" "Your old war buddy." Red Hoodie shot back. The man leaned back slightly. "No, a young soldier who thought he was untouchable until he learned otherwise." The boy snorted, but his friends weren't laughing anymore. Their smirks were fading. "Whatever, man," the boy muttered. "No one cares about your old stories." The man's lips curled into a faint smile, not amused but knowing. "Careful, son. Sometimes stories are the only thing that keeps you from repeating the same mistakes." The bus seemed to hum quieter as his words sank in, but Red Hoodie wasn't ready to back down. He stepped closer, inches from the man. "You think you're so wise? Why don't you prove it?" The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. The old man adjusted his cane, his movements deliberate and measured, like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The storm brewing inside him wasn't born of anger. It was forged by experience, and it was about to teach these boys the real meaning of strength. The bus rumbled on, the passengers frozen in the tension that now filled the air. Slowly, the elderly man rose from his seat, using his cane to steady himself. He wasn't a large man. Age had taken much of his strength, but there was something about the way he carried himself that made him seem taller, more powerful. The boys who had been making a scene earlier watched him, their smirks fading as curiosity took hold. "You want me to prove something?" the man asked, his voice calm, almost quiet, yet it commanded the attention of everyone on board. His eyes locked onto the boy in the red hoodie, unwavering. "Let's talk about proof." Red Hoodie chuckled nervously and stepped back. "What? You're going to hit me with that cane, old man." The man's hand brushed the top of the cane, but he didn't lift it. "No," he said simply, "but I will teach you something. Your mouth hasn't learned restraint yet." The air felt charged with tension, the kind that prickles at the back of your neck. The other passengers leaned forward, not wanting to miss a word. "Do you think this is strength?" the man continued, gesturing at the boys. "Showing off, mocking people in public? That's not strength. That's fear. Fear that the world will see you for what you really are." The boys' friends shifted uncomfortably, their earlier confidence faltering. One of them muttered, "Come on, let's just sit down." But Red Hoodie wasn't ready to let it go. His pride was at stake. "You don't know anything about me, old man," he shot back, though his voice had lost its edge. "I know more than you think," the man replied, his voice still calm. You see this cane? It's not just a stick. It's a reminder. Every scar, every ache in these bones tells a story. Stories of battles fought not with fists, but with courage, discipline, and honor. Things you wouldn't understand, because you've never had to earn them. Red Hoodie clenched his fist but didn't move. The old man leaned in, his gaze sharp. Do you know what it's like to watch your friends die so you can live? To carry their memory with you every day, knowing you owe them more than you can ever repay. The boy blinked, his jaw working as if he wanted to speak, but no words came. The bus was silent except for the steady hum of the engine, and every passenger was riveted. You're lucky, kid, the old man said, his tone softening just a little. You don't have to learn these lessons the hard way. But if you keep disrespecting people, acting like the world owes you something, you'll find out soon enough. And when that day comes, you'll wish you had listened. The boy's face reddened, not with anger but with shame. He looked away, his shoulders slumping. His friends, now quiet, avoided the old man's gaze. The bus driver glanced in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed but hands steady on the wheel. No one else moved. The old man straightened, his voice firm. Now, sit down or get off this bus. Red Hoodie hesitated for a moment, then muttered something under his breath before retreating to his seat. His friends followed, their bravado gone. The confrontation was over, but the lesson had just begun. It wasn't just the boys who had something to think about. As the tension eased, passengers exchanged quiet glances, some with approval, others in disbelief. The elderly man remained standing for a moment, his grip on the cane steady. His gaze swept over the bus, briefly meeting the eyes of each passenger, before he slowly returned to his seat. A woman sitting near the front finally broke the silence. Sir, she said, her voice hesitant but respectful. That was brave. There was a mix of admiration and guilt in her words, as if she regretted not speaking up earlier. The man nodded slightly. It wasn't bravery, he said, just doing what needed to be done. Behind him, the boys were unusually quiet, their earlier laughter a distant memory. Red Hoodie stared out the window, arms crossed, while his friends whispered among themselves, clearly shaken. A young man near the back, wearing headphones, spoke up. Vietnam, right? He asked, his tone tentative. The old man turned slightly. Yes, he replied. My grandfather served there, the young man continued. He didn't talk about it much, but when he did, he glanced down at his hands. Thank you for what you did. The old man smiled faintly. We all gave something, some of us more than others. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Several passengers nodded quietly, the weight of his statement settling in. One of the boys, the stocky one with the backward cap, cleared his throat. Sir, he said, his voice barely audible, I'm sorry. We shouldn't have said those things. The man looked at him, his expression softening. Apology accepted, he said. But remember, respect isn't something you give because someone demands it. You give it because it's the right thing to do. The boy nodded, his face flushed. Red Hoodie didn't say anything, but he shifted uncomfortably, clearly wrestling with his thoughts. The bus slowed as it reached the next stop. The old man glanced out the window at the familiar street corner. He tapped his cane on the floor, then rose to his feet. Before exiting, he turned to face the bus. Kindness and respect cost you nothing, he said, addressing everyone. But withholding them can cost you everything. The door opened with a hiss and the old man stepped off, his steady gait leaving a lasting impression. The silence lingered long after he was gone, the passengers deep in thought. They hadn't just witnessed a confrontation. They had witnessed a lesson in dignity, one that would stay with them long after the bus ride ended.